A death row fight, Scott Dozier's final days, and the tragic end. Hi everyone. What happens when a man on death row doesn't fight to live, but begs the state to let him die? This is the haunting case of Scott Dozier, a convicted killer who shocked the justice system not by resisting his sentence, but by embracing it. After more than a decade behind bars, Dozier waived his appeals and demanded execution. But what followed was a strange and unsettling standoff between one man's will to die and a system that couldn't or wouldn't follow through. As Nevada scrambled to find execution drugs, legal battles erupted. Pharmaceutical companies sued, and the state's lethal injection protocol became a national controversy. All the while, Dozier waited in limbo, resigned, frustrated, and eerily calm. Tonight, we take you deep inside the final days of a death row inmate who was ready to die long before the state was ready to kill. Was this justice denied, or something far more disturbing? Stay with us. Dear friends, Scott Dozier wasn't like most men on death row. He didn't cry out for mercy. He didn't cling to life. Instead, he asked, no, insisted that the state of Nevada carry out his execution. His crime was brutal. In 2002, Dozier was convicted of the grisly murder of 22-year-old Jeremiah Miller in a Las Vegas motel. The victim's torso was discovered stuffed into a suitcase. And that wasn't the only killing connected to Dozier. He was also implicated in a separate murder in Arizona. But even as he faced death, it wasn't guilt that consumed him. It was frustration. You see, Dozier was sentenced to death in 2007. Yet by 2016, nearly a decade later, Nevada still hadn't carried out his execution. The reason: a growing national crisis over the drugs used for lethal injection. Pharmaceutical companies had begun refusing to sell drugs to states if they were to be used for capital punishment. Even Pfizer, one of the last holdouts, banned such sales. As a result, states like Nevada were left scrambling, unable to legally obtain the cocktail of drugs they needed to carry out executions. Dozier had had enough. Tired of the endless cycle of appeals and delays, he voluntarily gave up his rights to further appeals. He told the judge plainly he was ready to die. In October 2016, his insistence on execution sent the state into chaos. They had a condemned man ready for death, but no way to kill him. Nevada's solution was both controversial and unprecedented. They proposed using fentanyl, a synthetic opioid so powerful it had caused over 19,000 overdose deaths in the US in 2010 alone. Alongside fentanyl, the state added midazolam and a paralytic drug. But the combination had never been used in an execution before. Would it be effective? Would it be humane? Experts weren't so sure. Especially concerning was the use of the paralytic. Its purpose was to immobilize the body, but it could also mask signs of suffering, potentially causing a death, in violation of the Eighth Amendment's ban on cruel and unusual punishment. The courts intervened. A judge ordered that the paralytic be removed, but Nevada refused to proceed without it arguing. It was essential for maintaining order during the execution. With the state and courts locked in a standoff, Dozier remained in limbo, and still he waited. When journalists spoke with Dozier on death row, they were struck by his clarity. He wasn't afraid. He didn't beg. He even joked. "You've got pharmaceutical-grade fentanyl, just bang me up, man," he said. With a wry grin. He seemed resigned to death, but annoyed by the incompetence of the state in carrying it out. "These people don't want to die," he said, of others on death row. "But I do. And still they can't get it done." Nevada's lack of executions wasn't unique. Across the US, legal challenges and drug shortages were stalling executions nationwide. Botched lethal injections in states like Oklahoma and Ohio had horrified the public, men writhing in agony for minutes, even hours. States were beginning to consider alternatives, like the firing squad. In Utah, lawmakers had brought it back in 2015. The rationale: it was fast, effective, and didn't rely on a drug cocktail that might fail. But Nevada had no such options. Lethal injection was its only method, and that method was now legally and logistically paralyzed. By mid-2018, Nevada revised its lethal injection protocol, substituting another controversial drug, midazolam. This sedative had been linked to prolonged, agonizing executions in several states. Dozier was informed that his execution would be rescheduled for July 11, 2018. He accepted the possibility of a painful death. In fact, he was more concerned about how his mother might perceive it. "If I'm twitching or gasping," he told reporters, "don't let her think I'm suffering. 2 days before his execution date, Dozier was interviewed for what was expected to be his final time. He was reflective, but not apologetic. He didn't deny his role in Miller's death, but he questioned whether the state had the moral authority to carry out executions at all. "I'm opposed to governments killing their citizens," he said. And yet he still welcomed his own. "I don't think I deserve the death penalty," he admitted. "But if Jeremiah Miller's family thinks I killed him, they should have the right to kill me." Dozier had a son. When asked what he hoped for his child, he didn't hesitate. "I hope he finds happiness in ways I never could," he said quietly. That was the most emotion he showed. But fate stepped in again. Just hours before the execution was to take place, the pharmaceutical company that manufactured midazolam sued the state of Nevada. The company claimed the state had obtained the drug through deception and demanded that it not be used to kill Dozier. A judge agreed and issued a last-minute stay. Once again, Scott Dozier's death was postponed. He was devastated. In letters to journalists, Dozier said he felt tortured by the repeated delays. His mental health began to deteriorate. Despite being on suicide watch, he had made several previous attempts to end his own life. In the absence of state action, he was now considering taking matters into his own hands. On January 5, 2019, Scott Dozier was found dead in his cell at Ely State Prison. He had hung himself using a bedsheet. In the end, it wasn't the courts or the executioners or the drugs that took his life. It was the man himself. He had fought the system not to live, but to die. And in the end, he succeeded on his own terms. The story of Scott Dozier isn't just about one man's crime or punishment. It's about a justice system torn between moral doubt and procedural paralysis. About a state so determined to carry out a sentence, yet unable to navigate the maze it created for itself. It's a story of bureaucracy, medicine, philosophy, and the haunting question of what it really means to have the right to die. And for those still waiting on death row, his final act leaves behind a legacy of quiet defiance. A man who didn't fear the end, but feared that it might never come. In the end, Scott Dozier's story wasn't just about guilt or innocence. It was about control. A man condemned for horrific crimes. Yes, but also a man who defied the machine. A death row fight, Scott Dozier's final days, and the tragic end.